So this week I feel a bit more like a podcaster because I've got headphones and they're working and it's the good mic.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Just off. Yeah, yeah, it's happening. It's
Don't move it. Now we've messed it all up. Oh my God.
Or TA leaders who are ready to get their seat at the table. The People MBA. Subscribe at peoplemba.com for access to all the guides, templates, and other tools referenced on our show. This episode is being brought to you by Plum. Check out plum.io to unlock the benefits of 360-degree talent insights. Thank you for calling the People MBA. Please leave your message and get on with the rest of your day, I guess.
Hi guys, it's Graham Johnson from Merlin Entertainments. So the question I've got for you is some CFOs are interested in the net present value of the business. It's how they value businesses. So I've actually been asked how to align employer brand and talent work to the net present value of a business. What are your thoughts on that question? Thanks, guys.
All right. So you heard the voicemail. Today, you can guess, we're talking about how to talk to the unholiest of unholies, the CFO. Behind the curtain, the great and powerful Oz, as it were, the person who has that magic ability to do this thing called cut checks. And that is power. That's real power. And so it's really, really important that if you want to get your seat at the table, you understand what they're thinking about, what they care about, so that you can build relationships and talk to them more effectively, more valuably, and get what you want done.
So it's a brilliant question, this, and I've answered this question in multiple different sort of incantations in different companies over the years. So it feels like a great place to start the whole conversation. To be honest, James, because this is the crux of it, really. How do we align TA and everything around it with the single most important thing on the desk of a CFO?
I mean, yeah, it is so powerful. You'd think that, and that's the game we're playing. It is a game of power dynamics, right? Where the TA has low perceived power and the CFO has infinite perceived power, and we got to kind of merge the two. We got to bring them into balance because the TA leader has so much power, and what they're doing, they should have all that power. They should drive the growth and be seen that way. So before we dive all the way in, this is a reminder that we've built a 9-step document on how to build a proper relationship, a useful, valuable, effective relationship with your CFO. It's free. You just go to peoplemba.com. It's brought to you by the good people at Plum. Thanks, Plum, for sponsoring this, but that's the download you want to go get to get all the details. Today, we're not going to go all the way in. We're not going to hit every element, but we will cover the document and go deep on one or two ideas. So, Brian, what are we talking about? What is this? What is the magical power of a relationship between TA and CFO?
So the first thing that jumps out at me is, and I'm stating the obvious here, is it's no good being great at your function without being great at your function with a very intentional thought of the context of how it plugs into the business. And as soon as you sort of make that alignment with what's important to the senior stakeholders of your organization, and you're constantly looking for opportunities to plug in and connect what you're doing as a derivative support and dependency on what they care about, then I think everything starts to fall into place. So Graham's question is, for me, the perfect place to start, because ultimately that's what CFOs care about. How to value the business today, how to value the business tomorrow. And I see, there's 3 obvious things that jump straight out at me, and the things that I usually talk about in this arena. The potential impact on revenue. Okay. The ability to be productive and drive revenue. Second is the impact on cost. So literally the same, but in reverse. If it's more inefficient to drive revenue, or it takes longer. And then the third one, which is probably the most powerful, is the risk premium of a plan or the intentions of leadership. So I've got a sporting analogy. I don't know whether you want to indulge this.
We might as well go for it. We might as well. We talked soccer in Liverpool last time. Let's go. I want to see what sport this is. I want to see you move and change sports every single time. That would be the challenge.
All right. Well, Okay, well, obviously, soccer slash football, proper football, no offense, America, is what's rattling around in my head. But let's
Sure.
see how we go. So for me, talent attraction is like making sure you've got the best players on your team to win a championship. So if a company doesn't hire the right people quickly or keep them happy, it slows everything down, like trying to play a game with missing players or inadequate players. So this means projects take longer, new ideas don't happen as fast, and the company spends more money fixing mistakes or hiring again. And all of this mess lowers how much money the company can make now and in the future. So it hurts the value today. So getting great people in the door and keeping them is absolutely essential to hitting goals. So if you've got a known weakened side going into a match, the betting odds to win will be against you. This is the same as a CFO having to make very practical predictions. The net present value, which is the ability to win matches today and tomorrow. So if the present risk and consequences are not being adequately resourced in that way, you're likely to not have a high enough value. So for me, that's the big lever. And so the final bit of the analogy, one way to give the CFO more confidence is also, and in a strong and net present value, is a good track record, a strategy in the transfer market, and confidence your coach can get the best performance out of the new and existing side. So there you go.
You really
I
took
think
it.
I
You really
think
took
that's a
it.
great analogy, and I wasn't prejudiced against soccer or football. It could have
That's
worked
fine.
for any sport.
Yeah, I gotta have a mental note to find fake sports announcement music for the background for these. Like a
Ah,
ba 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 ba, like just the end credits of okay, welcome
yeah.
to football tonight.
John
Yeah,
Madden comes to mind. There you go. That'll American English
yeah,
balance.
yeah. Well, look, and I think first off, that ties perfectly in with my personal motto, which is businesses only care about 4 and really 5 things: making money, saving money, making customers, limiting risk, stroking the ego. If you're talking to an executive.
Mm.
You nailed 3 of the 5, right? It's making money, saving money, limiting risk. That's so key. The problem is, whereas so much of the other business units have the power, flexibility, freedom, autonomy because they can point to a pile of money they're making,
Mm-hmm.
they can say, we made X million dollars this year. I bet we would make X $2 million next year if we had more budget. Hey,
Mm.
an opportunity showed up. We're going to buy a company. We're going to buy a function. We're going to we need to spend some real money to make this magical thing happen. CFO says yes. If the CFO gets a proper business case, and we talked about business cases before, but if they see a proper business case on why investing here makes money, saves money, it limits risk, they say yes. Now,
Mm-hmm.
pivot to TA, whose budget process looks nothing like that process, where it is, oh, it's the summer, I guess let's do wish listing. And that's when they take a bajillion demos and they listen to a lot of products and they look at a lot of pitches and they go, okay, I like this one, but I didn't like that one. Or that salesperson was really bad, or blah, blah, blah. And you make your wish list and then you submit, you get, a number in September. You say, okay, well, that's roughly the size of the box. So I will pick and choose which of my wish list will go into the box. And then come November, you get a sense of how much of the box actually exists. And then come January, maybe sometimes February, and sometimes even March, you actually get the money. And it is never more than you asked for. It's always less. Consequently, if you have an opportunity that you could invest money and make money, save money, whatever, it's a year before you can actually take advantage of it because you're not directly creating value, at least according to the business. Now, when the CFO sees that you create value, and the CFO sees that direct investment leads to direct return on that investment. Well, that's an interesting term. We should come back to that, a return on investment. I think I just invented that term. When they see that return or can anticipate that return, they have a different conversation. What is the rules for budgeting suddenly go out the window because you are now abiding by the laws of business, showing how you make money, save money, make customers, limit risk or stroke ego.
Yeah,
So good.
absolutely.
Go.
So just building on top of that as well, based on the train of thought that we've just articulated, I think it should be quite easy when you, especially when you look at other budget holders around you, to look at the cost per empty seat,
Mm,
especially if there's a particular initiative that is seen as the biggest revenue driver in the organization. It's like, okay, well, that team is only half capacity at the moment. Therefore, the cost per empty seat is X. Help me fill those seats to a value of, whatever that is. And then also, so that's just sort of basic recruitment cost and time to hire aspect. But from a brand perspective as well, like the more strategic, what about the capability of the caliber of talent we're able to bring in the door and keep? And this is where, you go 2 times 2 times 2. It's not 6. Like, it starts to exponentially grow, and wrapped
100%.
around that then is, okay, but of course, if I'm not adequately resourced and we don't have the reputation as an employee we need, and we don't reduce time and cost per hire, then the risk also exponentially goes up. And I think you were saying this off air as well, in terms of um, if we don't do this, um, we can't then support all of the other budget holders. It's almost like we're a critical dependency inside all of the other resource planning and strategic initiatives. So you say more because it was your thought.
Well, first of all, I think it's interesting that you have to have the mindset that says you cannot build the future of your business with last year's talent. You really have to say, I mean, look, let's be fair. It's been 2 years since ChatGPT came out. Are you hiring anybody who doesn't understand AI, or at least understand how to leverage it a little bit? I mean, if you are, what are you doing? What are you crazy? That's like, hey, how's your horse and buggy skill set? I mean, it just doesn't apply anymore. And if you're going to want to grow, and by the way, you do, that's how you do it. So I'm going to quote my friend Marcus Body. He is very smart and very British. So, there we go. I have clearly my podcast friends are all British on some level. He talks about how no one does the ROI calculation for electricity or a desk. Like, no one does that. But if you don't have it, it absolutely doesn't allow you to do all the things you want to do in the business. But why do they force TA to have that, make those calculations? It is exactly the same kind of dependency. If you don't have TA driving, building, generating, creating, bringing you the talent you need to grow, you're not going to grow. It's just that simple. It's just, you might as well turn the power off. That said, that means there's an ample opportunity for you to think strategically about how to build relationships, how to find the budget, how to generate interest. So, and as we're about to break into what the actual steps of how you build relationships, it's a huge strategic opportunity for you to say, if I have allies who see the value in what I'm doing, and some of them actually want to, I don't know, pony up a little money to fund these ideas because it serves them.
Yeah.
Well, then suddenly you have a lot more power as you're walking up to the CFO to ask for budget, to ask for opportunity, to whatever that is.
So sometimes I hear TA leaders coming up against this idea of, well, look, the resource planning just isn't smart or accurate or being done across the organization. And do you know what? I tend to turn that into an opportunity, because it's an opportunity for hurt and rescue. Because if you haven't got those numbers, which typically most organizations do not,
Yep.
show me an organization that's nailed this, I'll show you a unicorn with a rainbow coming out of its arse. But when
this podcast is rated E for explicit.
However, but when we go back to risk, and CFOs tend to be risk averse,
Totally.
for me, it's like, look, when the CEO says, why didn't we hit our numbers? We don't want the answer to be, we just didn't have enough people in those critical teams, and in the absence of very accurate resource planning numbers, there's the opportunity to over egg and say, well, do you want to go over or under? It's your call, right?
Yeah, totally. Look, salespeople are expected and tasked with predicting sales all the time. Recruiters never are. Recruiters are completely just kind of like, well, how long is it going to take to hire that new director of marketing? I don't know. Because it's not on them. It's not, they don't have that power to make the offer. They can't choose. So the power is distributed across multiple people. So they can't build prediction models to do that, which is exactly what CFOs need. I don't know. There might be some sort of model, like say building a pipeline to generate talent, to keep the talent on hand so you can reach out to it on a regular basis to lower your time to fill. I don't know. These are just talent acquisition terms. Perhaps you've heard of them, but these are the sort of things that CFOs, when they understand how it leads to getting the talent they need to actually meet their numbers, to meet their quotas, to meet their targets, they're interested. They don't treat it like like, I'm going to be fair. Sometimes when my kid's telling me a story about, I don't know, toast, and I'm like, okay, it's magical toast. Okay, good for you. Sometimes I feel like CFOs treat what says like it's magical toast. They go, okay, that's cool, kid. That's very sweet. That's very nice and go about. That's not what it is. It's not what it should be. And TA has so much value it brings to the table. It just doesn't know how to talk about it. So, Brian, let's get into why this really matters. That we're going to ask people to download this document to see a magical formula effectively for getting what you want, getting what they want. Why should they invest in the time? Why should they learn this skill and this process?
Well, I think quite simply, if you understand how to talk to the senior leadership in your organization, the budget holders, the people setting the vision and the strategy and all the rest of it, think about like why we're doing this, James. This is about getting the seat at the table. Now, as soon as you pull up in that seat, you need to be able to understand why you're there, what's going on, talk the language, and be relevant and seen as an equitable peer around that table. This means understanding the basics of the language of your CFO and learning to be more relevant and understand the context of what's going on around you. If you can do that, life gets so much easier with the budget and resource you need to do your job properly, not just tactically day to day, but strategically long term. And, for me, that's the secret to build momentum and, to steal your phrase, James, to sort of get the flywheel turning of things become easier and easier as you move forward. So, that's my first stab. What about you?
Yeah, I think, look, the way the budget process is set up, it is the biggest obvious red flag that business sees you as a cost center. And honestly, if I had a producer and wasn't the producer of this podcast, I'd say put a sound effect every time the word cost center shows up, because that is like the most dangerous phrase any TA leader can hear. The second you are saddled with that term, you have no power, you have no ability to make change. And really, a lot of what this entire podcast project is all about is how do you convert from being seen as a cost center to being seen as a value generating function. If you are seen as a cost center, you are saddled with the standard budget practice of summer, winter, and you actually get whatever crumbs are off the table. This is about saying, how do I communicate my value so I'm not seen as a cost center? So that the CFO can say, okay, there's a direct correlation between investing in this function and getting the stuff that I want, the stuff that I care about, which is really what the shareholders and the board and the CEO cares about. It's about that. And the problem is, most TA leaders have accepted the budget process as given to them. It is received wisdom that this is how it's supposed to be. And I've seen this process across many companies, and it seems like we've all accepted this is okay. And it's not. It's a good starting point, but if that's all you got, if that's the only shot you have to invest in tools, platforms, whatever you need, you're a cost center and you're never going to get everything you want. So go ahead.
What's the pushback on that then, James? Let's just say there's TA
Yeah.
leaders out there in that position currently. My first thought is a very basic approach of telling a to and from story in every situation. It's like, look, if we want to move from this performance to that performance, here's what's required, how long it'll take, what the cost is. And if with that approach, the transformational story is being communicated.
You said the magic word transformation.
You're putting the onus on the CFO, the budget holder, to say, well, you decide, do you want to stay where we are or do you want to go where we've been told we need to go? If so, like, how fast do you want to get there?
Yeah.
And how much are you willing to invest? How much of a priority is it to you? And at least then it's been evidenced and articulated very clearly. So you've got to get buy-in, or at least you've got an argument at the end of the year when you haven't hit your targets and you haven't, So that's my sort of basic way of thinking.
Yeah, no, it totally tracks. And I think whether you play offense or defense with it, you're still playing with it. It's still real. It's still, the more you are intentional in how your function is seen. Last time we talked about personal brand, we're almost in a way talking about function brand now. We're really talking about how TA, recruiting, HR is seen by the business. Are you HR, always complains that they're seen as the hall monitor for business. Don't do that. Don't run too fast. Don't you get like they're always telling people what not to do, and they don't show that their value necessarily. It's harder for them, and that's a separate podcast. Someone else can do that podcast. We're talking about TA here. TA gets the same kind of brunt. Like, hey, you're putting all these rules on how I find people. Oh, you're telling me I can't hire an agency to do this work. You're telling me you're going to take care of all the sourcing, and then you bring me mediocre talent. And when I try to source, you say I'm getting in your way. There's too much friction, and that's a big challenge. But that's a big point. Let's get into the concept of how do we talk to the CFO? How do we build relationships? How do we make that happen? We're going to talk about the actual document, which you can download for free, brought to you by Plum, on how to talk to a CFO to get what you want. Let's be fair. It's not just how do you walk up to them and say, hey, how's the weather? It's purpose-driven. It is purpose-built. It's designed. How do you think through the process of talking to it? And the document is really, I'm really excited about it. I hope you get a lot of value out of it because it's a structured process. It's not just here's 9 ideas we had and we, reached into the Scrabble bag and stuck them around. It is a step-by-step guide from how do you speak their language? How do you position yourself? Things to think of before you start the ask process. What are the things that help you get taken seriously? How do you manage the risks and rewards, and how do you talk about the risks and rewards? Because as we said, risk management, big part of it. What are actual strategies, and how do you frame the whole ask? So if you read this document, once we're done talking about it over at peoplemba.com, you will be very well positioned to figure out exactly what's all the homework you need to do, what's all the prep work you need to do to have an effective conversation with your CFO. So Brian, you were the instigator for this conversation. So let's get it started. Where would you like to start? What's a good dive down point we could get into?
Well, at the very start of this conversation with the CFO, and a common mistake that I see right at the beginning of this is the approach. And it's what you're not trying to do is get the CFO to come into your world and understand your language and how you do things. It's your job to take your world and step into theirs and articulate it and present it in their world in language that they understand. And it's kind of like, have you ever been in a situation where your car breaks down, mechanic comes out, opens the hood or the bonnet, they know what's going on, and then they want to show you and tell you exactly what's going to and how they're going to fix it, and you're just thinking, I really don't care.
Yeah,
I don't care for what you're saying right now. Just tell me when it's going to be fixed so I can get on my way. The CFO just wants to know, like, how much you need, why you need it, and what the impact is going to be to the journey they're on. So the first thing is speak their language. Take the time to understand what's keeping them up at night, the pressures on their desk, the CEO's directives, the dependencies that you can tap into, and how to be super relevant in their world. Don't try and bring them into yours and bore them to death with a load of inane stuff that, frankly, they just don't care about.
They really don't. And I think one of the challenging parts is that given TA's position in most businesses as a cost center, cue the sound effect.
Cost center.
We see the CFO as the person who's trying to not spend money. We see them as the person trying to shave budgets, trying to squeeze budgets, trying to save as much as money. And we tend to pigeonhole them as people who don't want to spend money. And in my experience, once you really know a CFO and understand what their world is, nothing could be farther from the truth. They love to spend money, provided it has a return, provided it achieves larger goals. Not their goals necessarily. They are the kind of conduit to make sure money, which is the universal language of business, is going from the work being done to the outcome being desired by the board, by the CEO, by the stakeholders, stockholders, whoever that is. Yeah. So don't think of them as how do I get them to not feel like this is expensive. Don't think of them as the person who's with the eye shade and the ledger trying to say, I'm going to squeeze out, Dickens style, 4 more cents, 4 more hay pennies out of this particular, and that's a joke for people who like Dickens, all 3 of you. It's not about that. It is about they're trying to generate value, and the tool by which they do that is money. So your job is to step in and say, if that's the case, I understand what you're trying to achieve. This is how I can help you achieve that. This is how much it costs. This is how it works. And skim over the this is how it works part. Like whenever I talk about how to present materials, I say that middle section, when you talk about all the cool things you're going to do, can you just just boil that down to like half a slide and get it done in 15 seconds because that's all anybody cares about. So that's your stuff, not their stuff. So
Yeah.
speak their language is 100% right.
Yeah, because I think you make a really good point. CFOs do want to spend money. Actually, what they want to do is invest money. They don't want to waste money.
I love that. That is exactly right.
Yeah. So if you say, "Here's what I want to spend money on," and you don't get buy-in, that's not the fault of your CFO not wanting to spend money. That's the fault of yours not justifying how you're going to invest money effectively enough. And actually, if you think of it as like a ratchet or a lever, if you can say, look, for every dollar spent, the business will get back 6 or 7 or whatever, in that case, to your point, James, that's where the CFO dumps money
Yes.
in your direction. You just have to be able to justify it in their language.
Yeah, if you walked down the street and you saw an ATM that was saying, "I'd like to deposit $1 and I'll get back $10," would you ever leave that ATM? You'd be sticking your dollar in as much as you possibly could. That's how the CFO wants to see the world. They want to see the places where the return is so clear and so obvious and so credible that they'd be a fool not to invest in that thing. So, talk in their language, totally right. So the next thing I think we would dive into is one of my favorite words, really, ultimately, position. How do you position yourself and your ask, not just speaking the same language, but how do you position it so that you are heard with credibility? You are heard with the same sort of consideration as when the R&D team says, you know what, if we had a wind tunnel, we could make a blah, 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 blah. And you just make sweaters. What do you need a wind tunnel for? But if they have a strong pitch, if they can say, hey, look, if we spend $500,000 on a wind tunnel, we can save money or we can make money or we can design this thing. CFOs love that. So how do you position yourself in the TA function so that those conversations can also happen? Brian, where do you start? Because I think there's so many directions you can take that. What is a great kind of first step? What is a first piece of data or evidence or anything you think we should start with?
Well, if in doubt, ask what Jerry Maguire would do. Help me help you.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow. So so clearly the movie poster is behind you, not just for show. Okay. Got it. Noted.
Well, there's a lot of wisdom to be taken from Jerry Maguire. But yeah, help me help you. Aligning with what the CFO is already worried or excited about. And that goes for any budget holder across the organization. Because if you show up on multiple budget lines across an organization, then that demonstrates that you understand what's going on. You've plugged into the network and peers around you, and people are starting to appreciate the dependency and the function that you do. But ultimately, a great strategy in a business, there's multiple ways of communicating this. But I love the F1 as well. Does it make the car go faster?
Yeah.
And if you can answer that question and justify your ask in the context of top tier business strategy or initiatives that are known to be priority to the CFO and the leadership and all the rest of it, that's the place to start. And for me, that sums up this idea of positioning, because from adequate positioning comes suitable buy-in from those that matter.
Yeah.
That's how I would position that.
Yeah, so it means so to your point, if I'm breaking it down properly, if I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm hoping I do, this idea that does it make the car go faster is the only KPI, OKR metric, their North Star. Your business has same. What is it? You have to know it. Is it about, look, and every business is a little different. It might be about, look, the pain we're feeling is the empty seat, so that your job is not to say, we're going to pitch a tool that generates better talent. No, your pain point is empty seats. So your job is to pitch a tool that talks about shortening empty seats, to limit empty seats, to have a bench of people so that there's never an empty seats. And that's how you want to translate that. So you have to understand what their metric is, what their KPI is, and feed into that. Otherwise, they're just going to say, you're just asking for, you're asking Santa for Christmas gifts, and that's no way to be. You're never going to get heard.
Yeah. You need to be able to justify the ask. So rather than it be an ask, for me, it needs to be a thesis. And what's the difference? Well, the difference is you make a set of assumptions based on the known situation of the organization and say, look, I believe that if we invest here, here, and here, we can improve A, B, and C. My thesis is if we improve A, B, and C, the output of X, Y, and Z will increase or go down or this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And then ask for agreement. Like, would you agree, Mrs. or Mr. CFO? And if you get agreement, you are 50% on the journey of getting the budget.
Yeah. And if you don't, you got to remember you are in competition with every other function in the business. Like when you walk out of a CFO's office, you should mentally envision a line of everybody else waiting to ask for their budgets, right? Every dollar you get is a dollar taken away from someone else, which means it's cutthroat, but it also means if they can clearly connect what they're doing, if that wind tunnel is going to make better sweaters and make them a lot of money, okay, you have to beat that. You have to show how an investment in what you're doing matters. Otherwise, it's like back to your sports analogy, everybody else is driving sports cars and you're driving around in a go-kart. Like you're not going to get very far.
Mm-hmm.
How do you kind of connect that talent ask? How do you do some of that conversion math? Because CFOs don't think in terms of the value of talent or the relative value of talent, the difference between a Johnny Ives and someone who just graduated from design school, so to speak. How do you kind of convert that into what they care about? Is it all just money, or is it something more than that? Is there area for wiggle?
I think ultimately, black and white, it mostly is just about money. But then I think there is the grey area of risk attached to performance, and also cash flows. It's not just an annual budget that you get a check at the start of the year.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity to be smart and understand some commercial literacy. And if you do have a smart thesis, you might be able to justify, look, if we front load this aspect of my budget, you should be seeing a return on investment, which gives the business back that value in quarter 2 or quarter 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
So demonstrating the context and the impact and where the return on investment is going to land in the financial budgeting process is also something which just gives your CFO a little bit more confidence that you know what you're talking about.
Yes.
You're talking their language, and also reduces the risk of signing off the budget and sending it in your direction.
Yeah, the thing a CFO loves to say no to is when you come in with this laundry list of unprioritized, I want all of it, and they can guess that there is a order of operations. You have to build the website before you start to work on the CRM, before you start to work on. And if you ask for them all at once, they understand one thing. You don't understand how businesses work, which is unfair and the way the world works. So you have to be able to break that stuff down, not just by quarter, but to say, look, if we do X in quarter 1, the result to me in quarter 2 is X, but the result to the business in quarter 2 is Y. And that can show that you are not just asking for a pile of cash and you're going to spend it however you want, but that you are keeping in line with the business. And I think if this is a drinking game and we said business, you'd all be dead. But that's kind of the thing. It's all about learning to speak and talk and engage with the rest of the business. And I feel like that's almost insulting to say so much and necessary.
Yeah, it's still
just
worth saying it.
Yeah,
I know exactly what you mean. I think most TA leaders get that concept, but actually, without a step-by-step and just a simple way of laying this out, and without being able to put your hands on the tangible stuff that's going on around you, demonstrating that, is easier said than done. It's easy for us to say this, but without actually having that plan and without going through the steps that we've outlined in the download, it can be messy, it can be complex, and it can be difficult.
Yeah. One more thing I want to dive into, because I think it's key. It's so key. And I think it's a thing that TA leaders are starting to take seriously. I think there's been a lot of lip service paid over the last 2 or 3 years, but now the best TA leaders are taking it seriously. And that is not just seeing the CFO as the sole source of money, but seeing your other clients around the business as other sources of money. And if you can say, oh, the sales team is going to invest in the Des Moines office, and so they need 300 salespeople in Des Moines and they need them by next week, do it. You can't, because you're not scoped, you're not budgeted for that. That sales office is going to generate a certain amount of return. It's going to generate a certain number of sales. They've anticipated, they've predicted, they know it. some portion of that needs to go into your pocket. Some portion of that needs to fund what you're doing. The CFO may not have considered that because, let's be fair, talent is not necessarily top of mind of their world. But when the person who has been tasked with building that office realizes how many hires they have to make and that you are completely under-resourced, they're the ones who are going to feel the pain. So start talking to them. If they can show the return on having all those salespeople, you need to say, look, this is how you invest to generate those sales. That is a direct correlation between if you fund our recruiting efforts, you will be able to build this office and fully staff it and fully generate sales, which leads to revenue, yada, yada, yada. And that can't always just be a conversation you have with the CFO. It has to happen in tandem with the business lead, the person who is driving that endeavor. And if you come into the CFO paired up, you are far more powerful, far more valuable, and far more credible than if you came in and say, hey, this other person's making me hire 300 people. I can't do that. What am I supposed to do? Give me money, mom. And it just doesn't work.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up the idea of credibility. Sometimes, like as a new TA leader, you join an organization, you've got to sort of earn those stripes and earn that sort of credibility. And one way to sort of fast track that is the idea of benchmarking, and being able to demonstrate your ask, not in the void of just this is what I think it'll take, but benchmarking levels of investment in similar companies around you. So any sort of previous business case or numbers and metrics that you've had from your previous experience, and also TA leaders, peers around you, being able to share some sort of performance input output sort of correlation, and the benchmarking against your current performance. So it's like, look, here's the level of investment required to keep performing at this level of efficiency. If we increase the investment, efficiency goes up. And by the way, here's the level of investment we need just to stand still. And so I think sometimes there's an assumption that if you don't invest in TA, it will operate at the same level, where actually the world is moving on, it's getting harder, talent is getting more competitive, as organizations around you investing in their employer brand, they're getting smarter, investing in technology, et cetera, et cetera. So having a dollar amount for just standing still at the current performance is very powerful. And no CFO wants to be accused of operating tactically when there's a strategic solution. And I think of paid media budgets, time to hire, cost per hire, those basic mechanical, tactical numbers, position it as this is the tax we pay each year for operating tactically instead of investing strategically. Oh, that, it makes every CFO wince. They think, oh God, I don't want anybody in this organization accusing me of operating tactically when we should be investing strategically.
And they just see you as a partner now. They're not someone who gets a piece of the pie. That you are someone who is helping them do better work and
bringing solutions as well.
Yeah, exactly. So look, let's close this out. There's so much more in the document. Go to peoplemba.com to go download it. Like I said, it's free, brought to you by Plum. There's so much here, but what are your thoughts on, no, wait, hold on. Shit. Hold on. How do I want to close this? Okay. So look, there's so much more information in the download. Just go to peoplemba.com to get the download for free, brought to you by Plum. Brian, let's wrap this up. Is there like a final thought on what people should be thinking about when they think about their relationship with their CFO, how to generate that relationship, or simply what they can expect from that relationship over time? Why is this worth a TA leader investing, see what I did there, their own time and resources to make happen?
Well, when you think about the old sort of how to win friends and influence people, if there's one person in the organization that you want as a best friend, it's a CFO. And in my experience, if you just go an inch towards the CFO in their world, in their language, appreciating and empathizing with the challenges they've got, making their life easy to make decisions on your budgeting ask versus everybody else who just doesn't understand the CFO, frankly, then life's going to be way easier. And there's a lot of smart TA leaders out there with a lot of experience, but in this download, there might be 9 sections that you're familiar with, but there might be one nugget that makes the difference, you know. And I think when we look at this this document we've produced, there's so much value in there. It's worth anyone's look, I think.
Yeah, if it reminds you of the smart thinking you've had once before and you may have just forgotten to do it this time, that's the win. It's look, we're not here to take the credit for you. We're not here to tell you we're smarter than anybody else. We're simply trying to break these elements down, document them. So they're resources you can tap anytime you need them. So you don't have to keep it all in your head. Which is already very busy and messy and chaotic. And frankly, mine's mostly goldfish at this point. So with that, Brian, thanks so much for talking. This is a great conversation about CFOs. To everybody else, make sure you check out the download. Check out peoplemba.com. Not just for this download. We had a download last week about personal branding, which if you missed it, what are you doing? Go do that now. Go make that happen. The whole project here is to help you get your seat at the table. And that means every week or so, we're bringing downloads, bringing better conversations. We're helping you focus your mind so that you can get exactly what you want as a TA leader. And that is the seat at the table, the respect, the credibility, the power, if you will. Yeah, let's get that crass. The power of doing great work. So tune in, subscribe, either YouTube, on the podcast, or People MBA, wherever you get your content. We're trying to put this in as many places as possible so it's easy for you to get it to. So thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week when we talk about, oh shit, I fucked it up. What are we talking about next week? I don't care. No, don't do it.
We're just going to go into the next.
Yeah, we'll go straight into the next topic. Yeah, that'd be great. Brian, give me a closing thought.
All right, so this week it's been brought to you by Plum and Jerry Maguire's Help Me, Help You. So go get the download straight away.
I'll see if I can find that clip and see if I can get it without the licensing problems, without involving a lawyer, an intellectual property lawyer. Because let's be fair, if you have to involve a lawyer, you've made some poor choices. Thanks everybody for listening. We will see you next week.
If you're hearing this, you're probably asleep. So this is your subliminal message to subscribe to the People MBA at peoplemba.com and share it with someone you'd like to impress. Either way, it will ensure that James can afford coffee for another week. Not that he actually needs more.